Hey guys, as you can tell from the background, I am at home right now and I actually do not have my tripod because I left it at school. I was not going to bring it home for just 3 days. So I'm going to hold the camera again, but this video is going to be a review of Peeps by Scott Westerfeld. This is actually the first vampire book I have read in a really long time. I've never read that many vampire books. I've read like Harry Potter has like one vampire in it. They're in like the universe. The Mortal Instruments has vampires, obviously. One of the main characters is a vampire, and there are other like really important characters that are vampires and whatnot, but I wouldn't necessarily term it a vampire book. But as far as books that are like completely centered around vampires go, I've read Twilight, and I've read a few other like lesser known series, and that's pretty much it. So I haven't read a ton of them because they're not like my favorite thing in the world, but I really like Scott Westerfeld's other books that I've read, especially the Ugly series. So I did want to read this, and I did really like it. It is not my favorite Scott Westerfeld book. I mean, my favorite is still the Ugly series as a whole, but this was definitely not my favorite, but I did really enjoy it. There is a lot of stuff about parasites in this book. Basically, it's a really kind of unique take on vampires, and the fact that in this book, vampires, or peeps as they're called because they're parasite positive, they have a illness, a parasitic illness, where a parasite takes over their brain and turns them into a vampire. So it's like a scientific sort of like diagnosable illness, but they're keeping it from the rest of the population to stop people from panicking and things. So it's a more kind of like trying to make it more kind of science-based than fantasy, which is really interesting, and I've never seen that done before, and I really liked that aspect of it and thought it was really interesting. And Cal, the main character, knows a lot about like all sorts of parasites, so throughout the entire book he's throwing out information about like real world parasites too, which is both interesting and kind of creepy at times, because you know, like human parasites that like invade your body and do stuff are really terrifying in a way that other illnesses aren't, because you have something else living inside of you and whatnot, like, even if you don't realize they're there, just thinking about it is really creepy. So those, not all of the ones he describes are human parasites either. He describes other bug parasites and things like that, but it's definitely a little bit disgusting, not overly disgusting in my opinion, and I'm usually kind of sensitive to that sort of stuff, but I thought that was a really interesting part of the story and I really liked it. I could probably talk more about the whole like vampire mythology. It's not even like entirely mythology, it's like factual sort of stuff about them in this book, but I don't want to go into it in too much detail because a lot of it is part of the plot and you kind of need to learn more as you go on. And it was really interesting, and I really liked that part of the book, like how the world was constructed and how the illness, in this case of being a vampire, was explained and explored was definitely like the greatest part of the book for me and made it, in my opinion. I think that's mostly what I have to say. I really like this book. There is a sequel, but it's not like a direct sort of sequel, I don't think. I have no idea if the characters in this book even show up in that one. I'm not going to go into detail about what I do know about the sequel because it is something, whereas even if I talk vaguely about the sequel, it could potentially spoil the ending of this. So I'm not going to say much about it, but I do think that it follows different characters than this book, and I have no idea if the characters in this book show up at all or are completely absent, or if they have like a cameo or what. But I do know that like the main characters are different characters. I do want to read it eventually. It probably will not happen soon, but I do want to, and I just get the feeling based on how this ended and what I do know about that one, that it's going to have a very different feel than this book did, which should be interesting. But yeah, I think that is all that I have to say. I definitely think, like I said, I'm not a huge vampire person. I did really like this book. I think I like this book more than I liked most vampire books. Even though it wasn't my favorite Scott Westerfeld book, I do think that this was like a really interesting take on vampires. So you may like this even if you don't like vampire things. If you think like a sort of like scientific, it's parasites causing it sort of aspect to vampires would make them more interesting to you. So yeah, I will see you guys later. Bye.